It was the day my life was supposed to change forever. The scent of fresh coffee hung in the air, mixing with the faint, sweet smell of the jasmine blooming by the kitchen window. Sunlight streamed through the French doors, illuminating dust. Motes dancing in the air of what was, for just a few more hours, my dream home. I remember the weight of the pen in my hand, the satisfying scratch as I signed the last document. The ink was barely dry on the biggest deal of my life, selling this beautiful, meticulously cared-for house, every corner filled with memories, to a billionaire. Yes, a billionaire. The kind of buyer you only read about in Forbes, who bought homes faster than most people bought groceries. This wasn't just a sale, it was my golden ticket. It was the promise of financial freedom, a fresh start, a move to a new city where I, Alex, could finally pursue my true passions without the constant gnawing worry of bills. My heart hammered with a joyous rhythm, a symphony of relief and excitement. I could practically taste the future, bright and limitless, just beyond my fingertips. But then, Karen struck. Not with a whisper, not with a passive-aggressive note slipped under the door, but with a stack of carefully crafted lies, a bureaucratic bombshell that threatened to unravel everything I had worked for, everything I had dreamed of. The phone rang, a sharp, jarring sound that cut through my post-signing euphoria. It was my real estate agent, her voice tight, strained, utterly devoid of the usual celebratory tone. "There's a problem," she started, the words falling like lead weights. My stomach plummeted. "The HOA," she continued. "They've just issued a notice, a long list of violations, against your property." My brow furrowed in confusion. Violations? My home was immaculate, always up to code, always in line with the neighborhood's pristine standards. I took pride in that. "What kind of violations?" I asked, a tremor starting in my voice. The pause on the other end felt like an eternity. Then she read them out, each accusation more absurd than the last. "Unapproved landscaping. A rose bush you planted 2 years ago. Non-compliant fence, the one that's been here for 15 years and passed every inspection. Exterior paint color not matching approved palettes. The exact shade I painted it with HOA approval 3 years ago. And a new one. Phantom noise complaints from multiple neighbors about loud parties. Parties I've never even had." The list went on, a ridiculous parade of fabricated offenses. My mind reeled. It was like reading a fictional novel about my own home. My agent then delivered the crushing blow. "The buyer's legal team has put everything on hold. They can't proceed with open violations. We need to clear these, and fast." The blood drained from my face. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was sabotage. This was personal. And I knew, with a sickening certainty, exactly who was behind it. Karen. Karen from number 14. The woman who lived for rules, who thrived on control, who had a personal vendetta against anyone who dared to live a life slightly outside her meticulously manicured expectations. Her eyes, always narrowed into judgmental slits, had often lingered on my property, perhaps because I occasionally left my recycling bin out for an extra hour, or because my dog barked twice too many when the mailman came. Petty, yes, but in Karen's world, these were grave offenses. I tried to recall any direct conflict, any argument that would warrant such an extreme, destructive act. Nothing. Just her usual cold glares and the feeling of being constantly scrutinized. This wasn't just about a rose bush. This was about stopping. My life, about ripping away my future simply because she could. The elation of moments ago evaporated, replaced by a cold dread and a furious, burning anger. I, Alex, grabbed my keys, my hands shaking. This couldn't stand. I wouldn't let her destroy my dream. I would confront her. I would expose her. I had to. My sale, my entire future, depended on it. But deep down, a chilling whisper of doubt began to creep in. Karen wasn't just a busybody. She was calculated. And this felt like a trap. carefully set, designed to ensnare me in a bureaucratic nightmare from which there might be no escape. The perfect, effortless sale had just spiraled into an impossible battle, and the fight had only just begun. The initial shock had given way to a burning, restless energy. I, Alex, couldn't just stand by while Karen systematically dismantled my future. My first instinct was to fight back, to dismantle her flimsy fabrications with undeniable truth. I spent the next few days engulfed in a bureaucratic nightmare. I pulled out old receipts for the paint, showing the HOA-approved color codes. I dug through dusty boxes in the garage for the original landscaping plan, submitted and approved when I first moved in. I gathered photographic evidence, time-stamped pictures of my unapproved rosebush thriving for years, clear shots of the non-compliant fence that predated even my ownership. I even went door to door, speaking to neighbors who, while generally polite, seemed hesitant to get involved. A few offered muttered reassurances that they had never heard a peep from my house, but none were willing to put their name on a formal statement. It was like pulling teeth from a ghost. The HOA office itself was a fortress of indifference. Calls went unanswered, emails vanished into the void, and every time I managed to speak to someone, I was met with a practiced politeness that masked a wall of stone. "We've received a complaint and we're simply following procedure," was the repeated mantra. Ms. Jenkins, Karen, is a respected board member, and her concerns are taken very seriously. My frustration mounted with each passing hour, each unanswered query. It was clear that the HOA wasn't just complicit. They were either intimidated by Karen or simply too lazy and disorganized to challenge her. Her influence, it seemed, stretched far beyond just her property line. As I battled the HOA, Karen's presence became a palpable, suffocating shadow. She started making her appearances more frequent, always just within sight, always with that smug, knowing smirk. One afternoon, while I was showing a friend the offending rose bush, I saw her peering from behind her curtains, a sinister silhouette. The next day, I received another HOA notice, this time for my recycling bin being visibly untidy and my mail overflowing, which it wasn't. It was a petty, relentless assault, a clear escalation of her campaign. I even caught her one morning, speaking in hushed, conspiratorial tones with Mrs. Henderson from next door, their heads together, their eyes darting towards my house. Mrs. Henderson, usually a sweet woman, suddenly seemed to avoid eye contact with me. Karen was actively spreading rumors, poisoning the well of neighborly goodwill. The gossip in the small community started to turn. Whispers of "that troublesome property" and "all those complaints" reached my ears. She was not just sabotaging my sale. She was systematically trying to isolate me, to paint me as the neighborhood pariah. The emotional toll was immense. The hopeful anticipation of a new life was replaced by constant anxiety, sleepless nights spent replaying conversations, searching for solutions. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, its walls closing in, suffocating under the weight of false accusations. Amidst this escalating personal war, there was the unsettling anomaly of the billionaire buyer. Their legal representative, a woman named Miss Thorne, was unnervingly calm. While my own agent was tearing her hair out, Miss Thorne remained composed, her voice smooth as polished stone. "We understand these things happen," she'd say, almost too calmly. "We appreciate your efforts to resolve the matter." She didn't pull out of the deal. She didn't even threaten to. Instead, she started asking odd questions, questions that seemed to go beyond the immediate sale. "Could you tell me more about the HOA's internal dispute resolution process? How long has Ms. Jenkins been on the board? Are there any common grievances among residents regarding the HOA's governance?" At first, I thought she was just being thorough, doing due diligence. But the regularity and specificity of her inquiries began to pique my suspicion. It was unusual, almost clinical, as if they weren't just buying a house but researching the entire ecosystem of the HOA. Was their patience a sign of true understanding, or something far more calculated? My agent, bless her heart, was also perplexed. "Most buyers would have walked away weeks ago," she confessed, her voice tight with bewilderment. "Especially a buyer of this caliber. They have limitless options." Ms. Thorne's persistent interest in the HOA's inner workings, her unusual focus on Ms. Jenkins' role, was a growing enigma. It felt like a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the narrative. My fight with Karen, once a desperate solo battle, now felt like it was being observed, analyzed, by someone with far greater resources and, perhaps, a very different agenda. The air thickened with unspoken possibilities, and a strange, unsettling feeling began to settle in my gut, that the billionaire buyer, far from being just a victim of Karen's antics, might somehow be connected to this unfolding drama in a way I couldn't yet comprehend. It was a faint whisper, a barely audible hum beneath the roaring frustration of my daily battle, but it was there, a growing, intriguing shadow. The walls were closing in. After weeks of relentless, frustrating battle against Karen's manufactured violations and the HOA's impenetrable bureaucracy, my hope was a thin, flickering candle in a hurricane. The billionaire's sale, my golden ticket, was on the brink of collapse. My real estate agent, usually so buoyant, had called that morning, her voice laced with resignation. "They're giving us 24 hours, she'd said, "to clear every single violation. Otherwise, the deal's off. I've never seen anything like it. It's almost like they want it to fail." Despair, cold and sharp, pierced through me. This wasn't just a house, it was my future, my escape. And Karen, with her petty vindictiveness, was taking it all away. I, Alex, sat slumped on the sofa, the meticulously typed HOA notices scattered around me like fallen leaves, each one a testament to her insidious malice. The phone buzzed. It wasn't my agent this time, but Miss Thorne, the billionaire's legal representative. Her voice, usually so composed, held a hint of urgency. "My client wishes to meet you, immediately, privately, and without your agent present." A knot tightened in my stomach. What now? Was this the final, polite rejection? The last nail in the coffin? I agreed, numbly, to meet her at a downtown skyscraper, its glass facade glinting imperiously in the afternoon sun. The elevator ascended, a silent, swift climb that felt like an ascent into another world. When the doors chimed open, I found myself in a sprawling penthouse office, minimalist yet opulent, with panoramic views of the city. Miss Thorne was waiting, and beside her, a man I instantly recognized from the news, Mr. Elias Thorne, the billionaire himself. He wasn't the detached corporate titan I'd imagined. His eyes, surprisingly warm and intelligent, met mine with a calm intensity. He gestured to a plush armchair, and I sat, my heart pounding, braced for the axe to fall. "Ms. Alex," he began, his voice surprisingly soft, "I understand you're going through a rather unique challenge with your HOA." I nodded, bracing myself. "Unique is one word for it," I managed, my voice a mere whisper. He smiled, a faint knowing curve of his lips. "Indeed, and it's precisely because of this uniqueness that we haven't withdrawn our offer." My eyebrows shot up. "What?" I asked, my voice cracking with disbelief. "Why? Most buyers would have run a mile." Mr. Thorne leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Because, Ms. Alex, we don't just want your house. We intend to acquire the entire way." The words hung in the air, echoing in the vast, silent office. The entire HOA. It was such an outlandish, audacious statement that for a moment I thought I'd misheard him. My mind struggled to process it. You mean, you're going to buy every house?" I stammered, utterly bewildered. He chuckled, softly. "Not every house, no. That would be inefficient. We are acquiring the Homeowners Association itself. its assets, its liabilities, its governance structure, its control over the community. We've been discreetly purchasing enough properties over the past year, empty lots, foreclosures, homes of residents looking to move on, to gain controlling interest in the HOA's voting shares. Your home, ironically, was simply the last piece of the puzzle we needed to consolidate absolute power. Karen's actions, while infuriating for you, served as an unexpected accelerant. My jaw dropped. The pieces started to click into place, a horrifying yet brilliant mosaic. The billionaire's unusual patience, Miss Thorne's probing questions about HOA governance. It wasn't about my rosebush. It was about the roots of power. In the neighborhood. But why? I finally managed, the word a strained whisper. Why would you do this? Mr. Thorne's expression turned serious, a flicker of something deeply personal in his eyes. Karen Jenkins is not unique, Miss Alex. My family, for generations, has been impacted by individuals like her, small-minded tyrants who weaponize bureaucratic systems, who thrive on control and petty power, destroying communities from within. My grandmother lost her retirement savings to a similar HOA scam orchestrated by a Karen figure. My company, Thorne Global Enterprises, is built on disrupting stagnant systems, on innovative solutions to systemic problems. And HOAs, in their current form, are often breeding grounds for exactly this kind of corruption and abuse. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the cityscape outside. We believe in communities, Ms. Alex, true communities, not fiefdoms ruled by self-appointed dictators. Your case, the sheer brazenness of Karen's false violations, became the perfect case study. It exposed the rot at the core of this particular HOA, making our intervention not just financially viable but morally imperative. He continued, laying out his audacious plan. He had compiled a dossier on Karen, a thick file detailing her long history of manipulating rules, harassing neighbors, and abusing her position. Her campaign against you, he explained, was a blessing in disguise. It provided us with irrefutable recent evidence of the HOA's gross mismanagement and an individual, board member's blatant abuse of power. It's the leverage we need to force a complete overhaul, to legally and ethically dismantle the current regime and restructure it into a transparent, truly community-focused entity. He then offered me a deal. Your home sale will proceed as planned, at the agreed-upon price, and in return, we would require your cooperation. Your testimony, your evidence against Karen and the current HOA board will be invaluable in the coming legal proceedings. You are the unwitting protagonist in a much larger story, and your experience is key to bringing about true change for this community. My mind raced, a whirlwind of emotions. Despair had given way to incredulity, then to a dawning, almost dizzying sense of awe. This wasn't just about selling my house anymore. This was about justice. This was about watching Karen, the architect of my nightmare, finally face a reckoning on a scale she could never have imagined. My quiet little battle had just become a pivotal moment in a billionaire's grand, strategic war against petty tyranny, and I was, unbelievably, on the winning side. The meeting with Mr. Thorne had transformed everything. The weight of despair had lifted, replaced by a surge of defiant hope and a thrill of vindication. I, Alex, wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a key player in a grand, meticulously orchestrated act of justice. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. Mr. Thorne's legal team, led by Ms. Thorne, swung into action with a chilling efficiency. They didn't just walk, they descended, a finely honed machine of legal strategy and overwhelming resources. Their first move was a precisely timed public announcement, a press release sent to local media outlets detailing Thorne Global Enterprises' intent to acquire majority voting shares in the HOA and initiate a comprehensive audit due to repeated allegations of mismanagement and questionable governance. The release subtly highlighted my case, referencing baseless violations levied against a property owner seeking to sell their home. The neighborhood, usually sleepy and gossipy, erupted. The community's email list, typically filled with mundane notices about trash pickup and landscaping, exploded with furious debates. Residents who had once given Karen a wide berth or silently endured her antics were now openly questioning everything. Some were outraged at the billionaire's corporate takeover, fearing higher fees or loss of community character, but many, more emboldened by the sheer scale of the opposition, began to cautiously, then openly, air their own grievances. Stories emerged. Whispered complaints about arbitrary fines, unaddressed maintenance issues, and the insidious way Karen had managed to get her personal projects approved while blocking others. It was a dam breaking. Karen, of course, was in a frenzy. I saw her pacing in her yard, phone glued to her ear, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. She looked like a cornered animal. She tried to rally support, calling emergency HOA meetings, sending out panicked, poorly worded emails denouncing the hostile corporate invasion, and painting me, Alex, as a traitor who had sold out her neighbors to big business. But her usual tactics, once so effective, now fell flat. The community was no longer intimidated. When she tried to discredit me by rehashing the false violations, Mr. Thorne's legal team immediately countered with a formal legal filing, citing defamation and demanding a retraction, attaching a comprehensive dossier of evidence proving the violations were baseless, along with sworn affidavits from past residents who had been harassed by Karen. It was a public, undeniable exposure of her maliciousness. My confidence soared with each calculated move by the Thorne team. I, Alex, spent hours with Ms. Thorne, meticulously going over every interaction with Karen, every detail of the false accusations. My frustration transformed into a cold, precise anger. I provided emails, dates, times, even recorded voicemails where Karen had been subtly threatening. It felt incredibly satisfying to weaponize truth against her lies. When Karen attempted to organize a neighborhood solidarity protest outside Mr. Thorne's temporary local office, barely 20 people showed up, mostly her closest cronies, looking awkward and embarrassed. Across the street, a larger group of residents stood, holding signs that read, "Transparency Now" and "End HOA Tyranny." A silent, powerful counter-protest that spoke volumes. The true unraveling began at an emergency HOA General Assembly called by Mr. Thorne's lawyers. The community hall was packed, buzzing with a nervous energy. Mr. Thorne himself wasn't there, but Ms. Thorne, a formidable presence in a sharp suit, presented the case. She laid out the financial irregularities discovered in their initial audit, the arbitrary imposition of fines, and then, with chilling precision, focused on Karen's pattern of abuse. She presented my case, projecting the original false violation notices onto a large screen, followed by my irrefutable evidence. Then she played excerpts from the compiled testimonies of other residents who had suffered under Karen's rule, quiet, previously unheard voices finally finding their platform. The room was silent, then a wave of murmuring, then murmuring turning into angry whispers. Karen, seated at the head table, her face ashen, tried to interrupt, to shout, to deny, but her voice, usually so piercing, was drowned out by the rising tide of discontent from the floor. "These are lies," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the screen. "Fabrications by a disgruntled resident and a greedy billionaire." But no one was listening anymore. One resident, a quiet elderly man named Mr. Peterson, stood up, his voice surprisingly clear, his hands trembling with emotion. "Karen," he said, "you fined me for overgrown bushes that were perfectly compliant. You told my wife her garden gnome, violated aesthetic guidelines. You made our lives miserable for years. We were too scared to fight back, but no more." His words sparked a ripple effect. Others stood up, one by one, sharing their own stories. their voices gaining strength with each revelation. Karen's carefully constructed facade of authority crumbled under the weight of years of accumulated grievances. She looked cornered, her eyes darting wildly, desperate for an escape. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a public shaming, played out before the very neighbors she had terrorized. The satisfaction Alex, felt was immense, watching her power drain away, exposed and vulnerable, her desperation a stark contrast to her earlier arrogance. The takeover was unfolding, and justice, long deferred, was finally beginning to assert itself. The dust finally settled. The HOA meeting, which had started with Karen's desperate shrieks, ended with her being formally removed from the board, a unanimous vote pushed through by Mr. Thorne's legal team and the now empowered residents. The financial irregularities Ms. Thorne had uncovered led to a deeper investigation, eventually revealing that Karen had been subtly diverting funds to her preferred contractors for years, often at inflated prices, and pocketing the difference. The phantom violations were her way of demonstrating control and justifying her influence. The consequences for Karen were swift and decisive. Not only was she stripped of all HOA power, but a civil suit was filed against her for defamation, fraud, and misallocation of community funds. The details were public, splashed across local news. She became a pariah, not just in our neighborhood, but in the wider community. Her meticulously cultivated image of a dutiful, rule-abiding citizen, shattered, replaced by the ugly truth of a petty tyrant exposed. Her once immaculate house, ironically, began to look neglected, a physical manifestation of her crumbling life. It was a stark, satisfying comeuppance, witnessing the architect of my nightmare receive the justice she so richly deserved. The transformation of the HOA was nothing short of miraculous. Under the temporary guidance of Mr. Thorne's appointed administrators, new, transparent bylaws were swiftly enacted. The old, opaque system of fines and arbitrary decisions was replaced by a clear, accessible dispute resolution process. There were town halls, not just heated meetings where residents could voice concerns and contribute to community projects. An independent auditor was hired to oversee all finances, and a new, interim board, comprised of truly invested and fair-minded residents, was elected. The air in the neighborhood, once thick with unspoken tension and passive-aggressive whispers, now felt lighter, cleaner. People started talking to each other again, genuinely, openly. The communal garden, long neglected due to bureaucratic squabbles, suddenly bloomed with new life as neighbors collaboratively tended to it. It was a tangible, beautiful testament to what a community could be when freed from the grip of fear and control. Amidst this upheaval, my home sale, the very catalyst of this extraordinary saga, finally moved forward. With the HOA's issues resolved and the legal complexities untangled, the final closing was seamless, almost anticlimactic after the drama that preceded it. The funds hit my account, and that golden ticket, once threatened, was now firmly in my hand. But the feeling was different. It wasn't just relief. It was a profound sense of triumph, not just for myself, Alex, but for the entire community. I hadn't just sold a house. I had, inadvertently, played a part in dismantling a toxic system. Reflecting on the entire ordeal, I realized how much I had changed. I had faced immense frustration, personal attack, and the crushing weight of helplessness. But I had also discovered a strength I didn't know I possessed. I learned that silence empowers bullies, and that sometimes the biggest battles are fought over the smallest, most personal slights. Mr. Thorne's intervention was extraordinary, a deus ex machina, but it was Karen's relentless malice that had ignited the fuse. It was a powerful lesson in resilience, in the unexpected ways fate can deliver justice, and in the sheer audacity required to challenge entrenched power, no matter how petty it may seem. As I, Alex, drove away from the neighborhood for the last time, my rearview mirror framed the familiar streets, but they looked different now. They shimmered with a new energy, a revitalized spirit. The house, my former home, stood proudly. No longer a battleground but a symbol of change. My dream of a new beginning had been forged in the fire of the Karen sabotage, transformed from a simple transaction into a grand narrative of justice. It served as a powerful reminder. Even the smallest acts of malice can, in the most unpredictable ways, pave the path for monumental, systemic change, proving that sometimes the biggest battles are won when an ordinary person refuses to back down, and an extraordinary force decides to listen.